Beep beep. Hello, listeners. Sorry for no new episode last week. We were supposed to be off this week, but I was quite burnt out, so I decided to take the time off of editing, and now instead you get last week's episode this week, and we'll be back next week. So, apologies for the unexplained absence, and I hope you guys enjoy a pretty solemn, pretty thoughtful discussion on G. Willow Wilson's The Bird King.
Welcome to Mortified, the Friendship Quest, a podcast where two long-distance friends bounce media recommendations, all in hopes the other will like it. I'm Aaron.
And I'm a wet compass.
And this week, we escape the fall of Granada in G. Willow Wilson's 2019 novel, The Bird King. Before we're rescued by a big dog man, remember you can help us on Mortified, the Legitimacy Quest by subscribing to us on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, signing up for our monthly newsletter through the link in our show notes, or following us on Twitter and Tumblr at MortifiedPod. Leyla.
Aaron.
Do you ever think about the end of the world?
In 2022? A lot, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this podcast is just us contemplating the apocalypse, but we'll be doing a lot of that here today with The Bird King. Do you want to walk our listeners through how we came about choosing this book?
We wanted to pick a book, and I went through my story graph, and we found this one, and it sounded interesting.
Yep. So that's why we're both I think we're gonna have a weird one today, because in contrast to some other books we've read, this one we didn't, fully understand what we were getting into. That's not to say, like, straight up, I think we both liked this book, but I think it hit us in a weird way, and I think it'll be fun for us to work through that. Yeah, I don't have a formal plot summary written out. We could just try to amble through it. Do you want to start, and then I'll try to jump in at places if you get lost?
Yeah, so, I mean...
I'll be your map maker.
Oh, thank you. I'll be the angry one.
Yeah.
So, this book takes place in the fall of an empire. It surrounds our main character, Fatima, who is a concubine to the Sultan. And she obviously does not want to be a concubine to the Sultan. And it's about her and her best friend, Hassan. And Hassan is, as Aaron so gracefully put it, he's got red hair, dark skin, and he's a magic man. He makes maps. He's a map maker. So one day, the Spanish Inquisition arrives at the foot of Granada and says, hey, we've been at war for a while. We're winning, so you have to surrender. And the whole castle is like, oh, shit fuck. And the Sultan tells Fatima while they're in bed that he basically sold Hassan, who is her oldest, dearest childhood friend, for the safety of others. And Fatima, who kind of begat this by showing Luz, the Spanish Inquisitor, the fact that Hassan's maps are magic and can just, like, make doors and shift landscapes. So, felt guilty about that, went to Hassan and said, we're running right now. And so most of this book is the journey of Fatima and Hassan, like, having to escape the grips of both the kingdom and the Inquisition. They are initially kind of aided by Lady Aisha, who is Fatima's, like, adoptive grandmother almost. Like, she took Fatima in. She's the mother of the Sultan. And Vikram, who is a dog man jinn. He's a jinn, but he's also a dog and also a man, and sometimes something in between. And they eventually, also his sister who rules, and a priest, sort of, or a monk named Gwennick, who they kind of steal on accident. They steal the boat and the man. So, it's a lot of traveling between, like, awful conditions and tunnels and eating raw rabbit and traveling on boat until they finally arrive on a magic island where time and space just sort of is and changes at its own will. And Fatima realizes that she is the Bird King, but so is everyone else. And they have to take one last stand against the Spanish Inquisition to keep their peace.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what happens. Shall we talk about our leading our leading lady Fatima? How do you find her?
I like that she sucks a little bit.
Yeah. Right. You mentioned that she was, she's raised in the palace as a concubine, right? You know, she. This takes place in, I think, 1492 or 91. So like, for the time period, she would have been one of like the wealthiest people just by proximity, to the Sultan. Living a relatively comfortable life. Like there's a lot of times where she when she's escaping, she realizes, she's like, oh man, my shoes are all messed up because I've only ever worn like soft slippers, and like she slowly has to become more mature and learn about the outside world on her journey. But yeah, like she's very privileged and pampered in many ways, and kind of an idiot, right? She like you said, she reveals Hassan's magic powers to Luz just because she was like, "Ooh, I don't know where to take this lady. I should take her to the most important man in the palace, I guess." Like a fool. But like she's like 18 years old, right? She is, barely. I mean, she's still functionally a child. She's like an adult, but like does not have any like real experience. She's very naive in some ways. And I think it also shows in the ways that she has this interaction with Hassan. The crux of this book is the relationship between Fatima and Hassan. Basically every review will bring up that they have like this platonic relationship that is like way more intimate and powerful than any sexual relationship that Fatima has. And that's very interesting, but also the ways in which they hurt each other, especially because I think Fatima does not understand, how Hassan maybe wants to be treated. That is true. She sucks a bit, but also I think we understand why she sucks, because like her whole thing is like, I am only ever coveted for my body or to become, somebody else's object. And that's a very, powerful thing. Her whole motivation is, I want to be free of this. I want to be the Sultan. I want to be the bird. She ends up being the Bird King. And like, I think she's a good, character with very, understandable motivations. And I think that's why her flaws work so well, because like it all makes sense for her character.
Yeah. She's very like, it's interesting to watch a character. Also, I really like the palace dynamics, I think is where I'm trying to go, because, you see a lot of these books, that are like these sort of historical fictions, where the palace life is like really rigid and very hierarchical, which is true here, but it's also very funny because there's a part where like when the Spanish Inquisition first shows up, Fatima decides she's very insulted by them, and so she, instead of handing them the tray of bread and olive oil, she like nudges it towards them with her foot. And there's other books I would have read that you would have had her in like prison for something like that. But instead, Lady Aisha was like, well, she's never gotten in trouble before. Like, it's never worked to get her in trouble before. So sorry about the concubine, I guess.
Yeah, Lady Aisha rules. She's like, yeah, sorry, my concubine was rude, idiots.
Yeah, I'm going to be rude too, but in a cooler way. Yeah, so it's I do like that she's very flawed and just kind of ambling and trying her best. And there's another part that struck me, which is like Vikram at one point was like, Jesus Christ, like, can't you walk? And she's like, the farthest I've ever walked was from one corner of the palace to the other. So like why would I know how to walk these like great distances on this terrain? She doesn't own shoes. She owns slippers. Yeah. And it's, I felt like the level as to which this girl was taken out of her comfort zone was very well thought out and good. I mean, she's really endearing. I like Fatima a lot.
No, I think she's great. How do we feel about Hassan?
How do we feel about? I relate to him. His taste in men sucks.
I was gonna say, I feel like you would like Hassan a lot, right? He is, the magical gay person who. Is just trying to get by, didn't ask for any of this shit, And then all of a sudden, Fatima is like, hey, I sold you out on accident anyway, we gotta go. And he's just like, Jesus, okay, let's bounce. But they, right, I think he's a little bit older than her. I think he's probably like, I would say 10 years older than her-ish. Maybe 8 at most. But like, yeah, they, he grew up like watching her grow up in the palace, and like, he became the map maker, and like was able to do these magic things, like, draw maps of places that don't exist, and functionally turn them into portals. And like the main thing that the story's name comes from is this game they used to play, because they found this copy of this story about the king of the birds, and how all the the king of the birds flew off to this island, and all the birds went to go try to rescue him or find him. And like, because whatever the copy they had is like the end is gone, they just made up their own game where they started, being like, okay, well, tell me about, the raven, or tell me about the hopoe, I think is the name. I don't know how to say that bird name. But
I was just reading it hoopoe.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? But like they have this game where they like they each tell each other stories about what happened to that particular bird, and the ways in which they tell those stories become important, because like Hassan's maps are sort of like the stories that he tells to himself. The way they describe Hassan's maps are like an act of perfect faith. And I really like that as a superpower. And I just write that I like that, him and Fatima telling these stories together, is the thing that shows how much they care for each other, and, it explains their history together. And, when that's what makes their like frequent fights in this book, you're like pretty hard to read.
Yeah, because you can tell they really, when you're in a bad situation, I mean, their relationship isn't necessarily healthy, right? No. It's like quite codependent, and it's quite it's odd, right? Like, it's an odd friendship. Like, he's very much a gay man, and they love one another to the point where, like, at one point Fatima suggests they get married, and she's like, everything, and that's where him being a little bit older comes in, because she's like, nothing else is important, and he's like, some things are kind of important, and I can't give those things to you. And it's yeah, I mean, like, I relate to him in the sense that I too am like a charismatic, kind of shut away, who doesn't recognize the depth of their own power a lot, and is surprised by compliments quite frequently, and is also historically the ugly friend. Now, listen, I know I'm hot, and I carry myself like a hot girl. Society does not always agree with me, and that's frankly their loss.
Hotness is a choice, as we've said.
Hotness is a choice and an attitude. And it is hot girl summer, as my queen Megan Thee Stallion says. But I found him very relatable in that sense. And like, you're right. Like I think the key flaw in their relationship is that he calls Fatima. This is an interesting one. He calls Fatima selfish, and because the book is written from Fatima's point of view, that her actions are not actually selfish, right? She does things out of a genuine care for Hassan, out of a genuine care. Like, she wants to save herself, and she's angry, but there's never a concrete thought in her head that's like, I need to save Hassan because I want him alive. It's usually just stops at like, I need to save Hassan. And yeah. I think that is an interesting depth, because both Hassan and the reader can read those actions as selfish, even if they're not stated outright. It makes Fatima not really an unreliable narrator so much as just a very human one, right? Who doesn't have like the personal insight to identify those things in herself. It also makes her very much like a fun teenager to read through, because she has to grow up so quickly, right? So she's in these adult shoes, but at the same time, she's just like, her frontal cortex just is not quite fully there yet. But yeah, their fights were very heartbreaking, because this is like the only other person you have in the world, and in this situation, and to be constantly like betrayed by their thoughtlessness is really heartbreaking to like have to work through, especially when that person doesn't perceive their own actions as being thoughtless.
Yeah, definitely. We'll talk about that when we get to Gwennick. How'd you like Luz?
I don't know what the fuck was up with that lady.
Luz is so weird, right? So Luz is the Inquisitor, as you said earlier. And like in the beginning, like, you know, Fatima really likes her because Luz, you know, understands the culture both of Moorish Andalus, but also like Muslim people of the time period, right? And she can handle all of Lady Aisha's jibes and you know, shots at her, and she really grows on Fatima. And then it's revealed that like she's just really there to root out witches, because that's what Inquisitors do. And you know, Fatima is like betrayed. She's like, how could she do this to me? It's like, yeah, girl, that's her job. But like, you know, her whole deal is she's very much you know, pick any fucking media property that's like, I'm a person who's motivated by religious belief. You know, she's one review I saw called her like Lady Coulter in the Golden Compass. You know, she's very much a Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? You know, a Catholic that wants to destroy things they don't understand. Like, it happens. That's what Catholics be doing. But like, yeah, Luz, like, you know, she's a ruthless Inquisitor. You know, multiple times we see her like torture someone. She's like, when she doesn't think she's getting the right information. There's a weird bit in the middle where it seems like you know, some sort of magic influences come over her and she becomes magical, and that kind of changes her. It makes her more powerful, but it like makes her more of herself. And it's weird. I don't know that I love how it was deployed there at the end. But you know, I think it's fine. I don't think it ruins the character. I just, the whole island sequence was off to me in a way that we'll talk about. But I liked her as a protagonist. I thought she was fine. You know, I think she served her purpose.
Yeah, I don't know if those comparisons to like Frollo are entirely accurate, because the thing I found interesting about this book overall is how ambiguous all the relationships are, right? Like, we live in a time and a culture where people are so happy and so ecstatic to have words to describe their identity that we've kind of overcorrected, and now there's a lot of like, well, if you're this, you can't be this, or if you're that, it can't be that, right? There's a lot of like, especially in the queer community, a lot of like
I was going to say, I saw your post about being bisexual on Tumblr earlier.
Yeah, because, you know, some people are talking about the fact that like they're nervous to go to Pride if they're bi, because they're like, am I going to get quizzed basically on how gay I am? I don't know if we have any younger listeners, but like if we do, guys, the meat space is a lot chiller than the internet. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody will ask you. And if somebody does ask you, you can just walk away from them. It's quite that easy. But yeah, so, you know, it's hard for people to like explore when they have to feel like they have to commit to one thing or the other. But like, again, Hassan and Fatima have that like odd, bordering on queer platonic like relationship where they're very, very codependent, very attached. Again, not the healthiest relationship, and that's fine, right? That's just the situation they're in. And the other thing is that like Luz is only a bad person depending on where you're sitting, right? Like Luz, I really like the way that this book paints religious conflict, in the sense that like when Luz first comes in, she's very charismatic, and she's very like kind, and you know, she draws Fatima in, and like Gwennick, when he talks about her, he's like, oh, she's pretty nice, until she like captures him herself. And you know, even like kicking Vikram, the way Vikram describes the incident, because she kicks him when he's a dog. The way Vikram describes the incident is it feels like it's powered by the thing that has possessed her. No, she wouldn't have been possessed at that time. No, that was all Luz. Luz kicks dogs.
Yeah. Literally, like, this is the thing, right? You save a cat, kick a dog, right? This is literally doing the thing.
Exactly, yeah. So, but, you know, if you are a Catholic Spaniard, Luz is a good person, right? And that's how she gets introduced, is trying to project the same kind of light that she does when she talks to Catholic Spaniards, and it's this like benevolence. But then the more you get to know her, the more you find out that she's not a good person at all, actually. She sucks ass. But regardless, Fatima still has moments where she like feels regret towards their relationship. Because it's messy, right? Queer bisexual icon. Fatima, right? Because there was like some weird tension between them two for a little time. But yeah, no, I really like the ambivalence with which this narrative treats its characters and their relationships, because you do really have to like it gives you an opportunity to fall for Luz in a way, right? To wonder if she's going to be there for the whole journey before she kicks a dog and then ultimately is like the Inquisitor. So, yeah, that's the, I don't, it is freeing a little bit for me to not say that I like or don't like a character. Like, she serves a good purpose. I don't know if I like her because Fatima doesn't know if she likes her, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think her as a character, she does exactly what she's supposed to do. And honestly, I think that's a compliment, right? I mean, fucking half of the characters I write don't do what I want them to do. It is hard to make a character work sometimes, but I think, G. Willow Wilson's a very accomplished author. I think she knows what she's doing. Luz, is an antagonist and it is effective at that. And, it is hard for me to give higher praise than that.
And she also sticks to an aesthetic, which I really appreciate. She's all about her, love black gowns.
Mm-hmm. We gotta love an evil nun. Let's talk about your favorite dog man, Vikram.
He's not even really that much my favorite. I just agree with Hassan in the sense that, like, there's a point where Fatima's like, holy shit, you're attracted to him. And Hassan's like, I can't help it. And I'm like, that's how I feel. You look at it like a piece of shit and you're like, oh my God, you think he's hot? And I'm like, I can't help it. Vikram is a chaos monster, quite literally a chaos monster. He just kind of is. Again, I like the ambiguity with which he's treated, in the sense that, like, when you live as long as Vikram has lived, relationships, time, words, names, appearances, none of it matters. Because he sent his quote-unquote sister, and then his sister shows up. She's like, oh yeah, we fuck sometimes. I don't think we're actually related. We just call each other that. Or that maybe we are, yes. But I don't think we are. Like, it's, they're fictional djinns, so it's not like you can't be like, can't accuse them of incest.
Their relationship reminds me of the relationships between the lictors in Harrow the Ninth, like between God Dad and like all his weird proteges, because they've all lived for like thousands of years and they've all had like horrible, messy fucking 5 ways, and like it's just once you've lived for X amount of years, then you just become a sloppy mess, and like I love that. Yeah,
I like that they're kind of messy and fun and weird. But yeah, Vikram, I like the moments in which he chooses to display softness, because those moments are always him being very fond of Fatima being a pissy little bitch, and I think that's great.
Yeah, 100%. Vikram is the spirit guardian sort of deal who helps guide Hassan and Fatima through like the period where they wouldn't have been able to survive on their own, getting them into the place where they can kind of stand on their own 2 feet.
And he does this because this whole shit happened. He got tangled up in all this because once upon a time he wanted to fuck Lady Aisha so bad that he stole her marriage slippers. She said, whatever, I'm going to tell my husband that I gave them to the poors, and he moved their wedding up a month. And ever since then, Aisha was like, all right, you owe me the cost of slippers now. And so this was the final credit card payment for
yeah, Lady Aisha rules.
Yeah, she rips. So we don't have a separate entry for her, but I feel like we've talked about her enough just to say she does. For a woman who owns slaves, she does fucking rip.
There is one apostrophe, but for the purposes of where she is in the story, I think she's very fun. And Gwennick, we have our Breton monk. He is. They accidentally kidnap him. He lightly betrays them, but then again they forgive him, and it all turns out okay until he spoilers is killed in the end.
Yeah, I can't say I was that bummed.
Nope, me either.
He, I feel like I don't have a lot of like quote unquote criticisms about this book because I feel like it's so kind of like esoteric and subjective and it's very much a myth. But I think that one of the only things I would say that like I wish there was a change to was Gwennick maybe should have been part of the original posse somehow that showed up at the palace and just been there a little bit earlier. So that maybe there could have been a little bit more of a tug of war between Fatima and Hassan about like some sort of attraction, because Gwennick basically shows up, sails a boat, fucks, and dies. Which, listen,
there's worse ways to live your life.
Not a bad character, not a bad way to spend your on-screen time, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. You know, you show up, you fuck, you die. That's how much of nature do. Which also, shout out to Vikram for being like, I saw a vision of my own death. I'm gonna go out fucking.
Yes, really extremely good.
But I wish there was more Gwenna, because I just like didn't have time to figure out his deal.
I agree. I think it's a very strange choice to throw him in like literally in the middle of the book, and then make him such a pivotal character. I think you're right that maybe we would have got to become more attached to him if he had shown up at the beginning, and maybe switch him out for Vikram, and then maybe Vikram is just kind of like popping in from there and again whenever the plot needs him to be there. Yeah, like I like Gwennick. I mean, I think his relationship with the divine is very fun. Maybe not fun, but like it's important, right? It's contrasted. He's like the good Catholic we get in this book because all the other Catholics suck ass. But like we see that he is truly in love with the practice of creating the Eucharist and the sacraments, and that's the thing that he cares about the most. And I think that's very fun, contrasted with like Hassan's deep Muslim faith, and the ways in which like we get these two religions clashing here at the end of the world. But yeah, if we had more time, I think those themes could have been explored better, but mostly he's just like, hey, you all don't know how to drive a boat, but I do. I think that he is mostly here to get the main characters through. I mean, I think the most important thing that happens is that he hooks up with Fatima, and that causes a fight between Hassan and Fatima, because Hassan is like, I told you I was into him, and Fatima's like, I didn't mean it, I guess, right? And this is where her thoughtlessness comes in. This is where they have this fight that is very heartbreaking. But besides that, I think Gwennick is not really as I think I don't think G. Willow Wilson is naive in her writing. I think that she knows how to deploy characters, and I'm sure she deployed Gwennick exactly the way that she wanted to. But I personally, like you said, I like a trio. I think having three characters is a very effective character way of doing characterization. That's why I like the Fatima, Hassan, Vikram thing. But I really, if we were going to make Gwennick, if we're going to draw these contrasts, I think it would have been better to swap Vikram out with Gwennick.
Yeah, I think the structure of the story is very interesting, because we're used to a 3-act structure. I would argue this one's got a 2-act structure. There's the Vikram Chronicles, and then there's the Gwennick Chronicles. And I was wondering if that was... It like caught me off guard, right? Because you don't really see characters like abruptly leaving a story in act, like dead ass in the middle of the book. Usually you save that for like the 1/3 or the 2/3. But again, G. Willow Wilson, kind of a master of ambiguity, if I will.
I mean, like this whole book, is written very lovingly. I think the descriptions are, excellent, right? I would really love to learn how to move, through a description in the way that Wilson does, because they're beautiful, and characters don't even really have to do much for her to take up pages and pages. And I think that's gonna... Do we actually want to just start to talk about the end of the book here? Because like that's kind of where I want to talk, because like I think at least in this book, Wilson's writing style, tends to be a little bit more like you said, ephemeral, esoteric, like not quite as tied to the plot. And this is a thing that I've, only vaguely read from, people on Twitter from, but like this book feels more like for lack of a better word, like vibes, like driven as opposed to plot driven, character driven. Because what happens, is that they just sort of, they get caught, but then like they get onto the boat and then there's like a long period where they're just on a boat. And then they show up on a fucking island. They find the Bird King. And then the last 100 pages of the book is them being like, we're on a magic island. And it really threw me for a loop. And like they have to like mount a whole fucking defense with a bunch of like frog people against the Spanish. And like, in one way, like, I kind of like, like I said in my notes, right? When Fatima becomes the Bird King, she is placed in the same position as her sultan was, facing an invading army in the end of, her little kingdom, because they found a little community on the island for a couple months. We'll talk a little bit about how this book is interested in the end of the world, but like, I don't know. There's a bit where a sea monster shows up, and then also Luz gets a thing in her eye that becomes a big worm, and the sea monster has to kill it, I guess. It's fucking wild.
Well, the worm is the thing that Hassan and Fatima freed on accident in the nothing space.
Yeah, but like it doesn't. I guess like it shows up in like wait, it shows up in Luz's eye a couple times, but like for it to turn into a big fucking worm monster at the end, I was like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. So the last 100, this reads like a poem to me.
Yes,
and not like a modern poem. A B A B C D C D rhyme scheme or whatever. I'm talking Epic of Gilgamesh, baby. I'm talking stone tablets. This feels like English class reading. I feel like I was supposed to get a lot more out of it than I actually did. It's something that requires multiple read-throughs to fully appreciate the poetry and the symbolism, and I feel like there's like research that has to go into it. Mm-hmm. In that sense, I appreciate it a lot, right? Like this is exquisitely and lovingly crafted, right?
Yeah.
I got a very deep sense of reverence for this book. It's beautiful. As a casual read, as something...
Yeah, it really does not work well for the format of Mortified, where we're doing one piece of media every week. Like, this is something we could talk about for a month.
Yeah, for real. We might, honestly. It might haunt me enough. For 3 weeks later, we'll get a DM from me. But, yeah, the last 100 pages really threw me. And I'm still like trying to process them because I did just finish the book like a couple of minutes before we started recording because I'm a busy girl and gorgeous girl. Sometimes I have to cram a whole book in one day. But the entire time I was reading the island bit, I was sitting there with myself and I was like, this has to be going somewhere. I'm not sure where. And it introduces a lot of characters in the last 100 pages where it feels, you know what it feels like? It felt like somebody's stepping in to guest DM an existing D&D campaign. Right?
I think that's true, yeah.
But it like, there's just so many new people. There's like Mary. Were they birds? Were they people? I don't know. Time was weird. Luz shows up. They don't kill her for some reason. Like I think ephemeral is the right word. Like, it is a very ephemeral piece of literature, and I really appreciate it. And I'm still sitting here and thinking about how I feel about it. Because, again, I appreciate its ambiguity and its fluidity so much. I think the reverence for and dedicated exploration of, like, incredibly, like, messy human feelings is so, like, well attended to in this book. I'm, like, kind of in awe of the craftsmanship of it. I'm sitting here with the story, and as somebody who just likes a tidy 3-act structure, I want to read a story, beginning to end, and just have it sit with me. And if I take something deeper from it, I take something deeper from it. A story that demands so much of me in this moment, I'm still sitting with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of I can hear the words coming out of my mouth. I have no idea if they're making sense because I think I've just been lost in the whirlwind of this book.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, this would be a hard thing to talk about immediately after finishing it, but no, I think your feelings hit a lot. Like, it is asking a lot of the reader, and I don't know that we're able, as readers, to give the book the attention it deserves.
The
sorry.
thing is, we could though, right? Because me, faithless, queer, you, ex-Catholic. I feel like we could if we were in grad school, which I'm sorry to bring that up to you this close after
I never want to be in grad school again, Leyla. You know this about me.
But if you and I were in grad school, right? And we were there for lit or whatever, and somebody was like, read The Bird King, and me and you could go off to our respective corners. We could have a spirited conversation about, the meaning of all of this. Mm-hmm. We are two extremely tired people nearing 30.
Yeah. You've been traveling this week, and I'm moving. So, unfortunately, we're not able to give this book the attention it deserved. But, I mean, it's not like we can't, right? Like the stuff about apocalypses, I think this book is very interested in, the ways in which worlds end, the ways in which, things change, and, I think, it's very, they explicitly call out, Fatima, being like, oh, I'm in the same situation the Sultan was, because, my little empire is about to be destroyed, and, everything's going to be changed, and a lot of people are going to die. Or I think that's very interesting, right? The ways in which all the people from out of time are traveling, and they've come from their own apocalypses, ends of the world, and this book has a lot of stuff going on in it. I really like the things it's saying. I think I like the things it's saying about the end of the world, which is yeah, it's gonna suck. It's bad. A lot of great noble things will be lost, but also it is worth pursuing that story. Continuing on in spite of devastation or, the lines drawn on a map, to create the spaces that are not on those maps, or, to draw your own maps in order to persist after you've passed the end of the known world. But yeah, ultimately, it is a little bit of a book that demands a lot, and, from just the one read through from it, I was like, this is just really fucking sad, yo.
It is. I mean, yeah, I think I have a because the apocalypse stuff was really interesting because I feel like I agree with that worldview, which is one, I really like the veneration of anger as a creative and as a constructive force. We have to be angry enough to survive. I relate to that a lot because I think if I didn't get extremely pissed off at one point, I would be quite dead. So anger has kept me alive for nearly a decade now, and it will continue to keep me alive. I'm just an angry little bitch, and I will continue to be that. But also, I really there's a point where Vikram tells Fatima, your world is ending, or it's going to be different. The world is ending. Something along those lines where yes, your world is ending as you know it, but that doesn't mean the world is ending. And I think in these times of extreme uncertainty, that we are facing, that is a sentiment that has been keeping me going, which is I look around and I go, okay, the world we know is over. Mm-hmm. Now we get to figure out what's next.
Right. I mean, this book came out in 2019, right? Immediately following that, the coronavirus, ended a certain kind of world as we know it. And, American politics being what they are, you could feel the ending of a certain kind of world, and whatever comes of that, we will have to fight and find a new way to survive, and to draw our own maps, whatever that might end up looking like.
Mine will be on the back of a brown McDonald's napkin that has some gentle grease stains on it.
Amen. I think that's about it. I mean, like, listen, if any of that sounded cool to you, I mean, I think it's a listen. I'm sure I got better as a writer just by reading it. I think there was really really good just prose in there. So check that out. Highly recommend. But yeah, unless you want to do a seminar, I don't know that there's much else we could say about the Bird King.
Yeah, I'll say this: if you have time to read this book, it's not particularly long, right? It's short of 400 pages. It took me like 5 hours. It's not like the biggest like literal commitment. If you have the time and the brain power, though, like I think that there's a couple of different types of Mortified episodes. There's ones where we hate the thing, we make fun of it, we have a great time. There's the ones where we love the thing, we make fun of it, we have a great time. And then there's ones that haunt us. And I think this lands in the haunted category of Mortified episodes. I think that if you have the room in your brain and your heart to like really sit with some prose, I would recommend this book to like anyone who like genuinely loves the craft of writing and reading. It is beautiful. And I wish I had more time to give to it.
Yeah. Same. Leyla, when we are not being haunted by our lack of time to commit to very dense and complicated texts, where can we be found on the internet?
You can find me at LEYLSCS on Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. I will eventually write and read and draw and whatnot. Work has me very, very busy. Aaron, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at AaronSXL, where I tweet about tabletop RPGs, health policy, and writing. I just released a new tabletop review of the game Navthem's End by Cinta Posadas and Pamela Punzelin, which was really a really cool way to, basically they just took their D&D characters and then like built a whole setting around them and made them saints. It was a really cool game. Highly recommend you check that out. That's at AA Voigt on YouTube. I do another podcast with our friends at The Bible Boys, where me and my ex-evangelical friends, there are also siblings, talk about Christian media. If you want to talk about more Catholic stuff or more poems, me and Josh recently read The Inferno by Dante Alighieri, which was one of my favorite episodes we've done, actually. That was a great time. But I think this week we're going to do God Friended Me, the Amazon show that somehow got 2 seasons. I don't know how it got 2 seasons before they canceled it, but it sure fucking did. Anyway, that'll be a fun episode. That'll come out sometime this week, hopefully. Our theme song is Obsolete by Keshko from the album Filmmakers Reference Kit Volume 2. You can find more of their music at keshko.bandcamp.com. Leyla.
Aaron.
How do we want to close this one out?
I don't know, because the effort of thinking too hard in bright sunlight has begun to tire me.
We'll see y'all next week.